Alrighty, y'all. Hello and welcome to some maps that are pretty freaking interesting. Some of these I didn't actually, I wouldn't have guessed existed. Let's go. First up, we have this map showing the railways in France. Now, this is something I don't know much about here in the U.S. Obviously, we have a lot of freight and cargo, but of course, passenger rail and fast, high-speed rail. Yeah, that's not a thing we get to really experience here. France definitely known for it, at least from what I have heard. Would have never guessed that it was even more extensive than what it already is. So this is 2014, pretty much modern era railways. You could see that, to me, as an American, looks very busy. Like lots of opportunities there. But it's pretty crazy. In 1930, it was, I would say, double, maybe even triple the amount of options. I mean, the railway network was extensive back then. Now, I wonder what the whole reasoning of it shrinking is. I can see it shrinking maybe a bit over time, getting rid of some unnecessary or very, rarely used lines. Okay, that makes sense. It's hard to maintain this kind of amount of stuff for a long time. Then again, this seems like a huge, huge shrinkage. So now, of course, someone makes a great point that I was pretty much thinking of already. The ones that do exist are way faster. So there you go. Next up has to do with coins. Ancient Roman coins. This one's pretty crazy. A map of every place where ancient Roman coins have been found. Brace yourself. Pretty big footprint here. Of course, almost like every square centimeter of, what you think of Europe now, right? All the way up, the British Isles, all the way west to Portugal, and of course, east scattered pretty freaking far. Not so much up way north, but definitely down south, even to the northern coast of Africa, and then all the way down to parts of, places like India over here in China and so forth. That's pretty crazy. I'm not a history buff by any means, but I know, ancient Rome, huge importance, big empire, right? But this really kind of puts into perspective the kind of ground they covered, you could say. Someone says, why are there so few in actual Italy? A lot of reasons. Coins were used to pay the army, which was mostly stationed on the periphery of the empire, or more stable part of the empire, so fewer reasons to people to bury their money, so there's less for us to find. Urban terrain and mountains, which means less chance to hoard it or find it afterwards. Coins remained in use and got melted into new coins. Locals who found the hoard kept it secret. Blah, blah, blah. So those are actually pretty practical reasons. And I guess they're kind of right. It is a little sparse when you look at Italy on the map. It is zoomed in here, but it is way more dense. Yeah, when you look at other kind of areas of Europe there. So it is pretty weird. The German language area before and after the World Wars. Now, this is pretty crazy. This is 2021, the darker blue. Of course, 1910 in the lighter blue. I didn't realize that it had spread long ago, 100 years ago, I guess you could say, more than it is now. Now it's, I guess, more concentrated. The French railway has shrunk and the German language footprint has actually shrunk as well. Didn't know that. And of course, another alarming map about the U.S. Most common means of transportation to work by county across the whole country. Yeah, car-centric is correct. Drive alone in a car, truck, or van. Public transportation is basically non-existent. There's the proof. This map would look a lot different if it was a map of pretty much any European country. Meanwhile, on the flip side, this is the lowest temperature recorded in each country in Europe. Now, I find this pretty fascinating. This is in Celsius, by the way, so this won't hit exactly the same for me just because I'm always going to be born and raised on Fahrenheit. Although I'm a little better at Celsius than I would have been a couple years ago. This is the lowest. So as you can see, it does vary greatly, right? Hungary, that temperature is, not as bad as some neighboring countries, right? So it just depends. There's always pockets. That's why weather is fascinating, because it can vary greatly in a short distance. I could tell you, I would have not expected to see temperatures like negative 50 Celsius in Italy, but of course, in my head, as an outsider, I would always think of coastal Italy, southern Italy, Sicily, right? You forget sometimes that Italy goes pretty far north up here, and of course there's high elevation areas, there's mountainous areas, and of course it's going to get cold up there. versus, way down here in the boot heel. Now, what's pretty fascinating is even Spain has had, a negative 32, but Portugal, just a very, very mild climate. Portugal's only ever had a negative 16 Celsius recorded temp, which is nowhere near as bad as basically everyone else. Now, it's no surprise that Northern Europe gets pretty cold, and I'd say it's probably no surprise that Russia would be the coldest because they have a crap load of land, right? Humongous country, and so, of course, you can go really north or really in the middle of nowhere in that country, and they have the highest, or I guess I should say the lowest, temperature ever recorded at negative 58.1. That sounds freaking miserable. Extreme hot and extreme cold are both uncomfortable. And I know the logic of when it's cold, you can layer up. And you're right, that's true. But for some reason, it's just more miserable to me. I'd rather be in extreme heat for one day than extreme cold. Cold is rough. I will say one other surprise from this list, if you didn't see it already, Ireland. I guess not a surprise, but just kind of to drive home, Ireland has a very mild climate. It never gets very hot. And it never gets freezing, super frozen tundra cold either. Very, mild climate that you can count on. It's kind of cool. Wine consumption in Europe, this varies greatly as well. No surprise, I suppose. The stereotypes must be true. The French love wine. So do the Italians. And so does Portugal. Actually, they're number one. Portugal drinks the most wine. Did you know that? I did not know that. I would not have guessed that. I would have guessed Italy, France being the tops for sure, but they are not. Germany up there a little higher than I would have thought. I mean, we know they love beer. I love German beer, I admit, but I have actually had a German wine on my anniversary, which was 2 months ago with my wife at a random restaurant here in town. It was like a pretty expensive imported German wine that we had. For the moment, like, what the hell? We tried it. And I have to say, I don't remember what it was, but it was a very, very good, very tasty. We were both pleasantly surprised. So German wine might be very legit. Do you agree? Now, this is crazy. This is map related, although it's pretty much just news. Italy is apparently building the longest suspension bridge in the world. 15.5 billion is the estimate. I've learned with this stuff, it'll probably be more, right? Let's get real. And this is going to link Sicily to the mainland for the first time, cutting travel time from 100 minutes down to 10 minutes. That is insane. Now, I don't know if this is actually happening. If anyone knows more concrete details on this, I would love to, hear. But this is something that would be fun to follow, right? That just sounds fascinating. It sounds a little freaky. I don't know how to feel about bridges. I kind of like them and like learning about them. But driving on them, I get a little, sketched out because, there's always that fear, is this thing going to collapse? Now, this is fascinating. This is countries without a metro system. And, of course, like we said earlier, the U.S. does have one. It's just pretty much non-existent. But, I always think of Europe as one of the leaders when it comes to public transportation, metro systems, this type of thing. There are actually quite a few, though, that don't. Now, of course, it's worth mentioning some of these are extremely small countries, right? Like Andorra, Monaco, right? So a metro system, not the biggest importance there as opposed to somewhere bigger like France or Germany or England. But nonetheless, you could see certain area here. Wow, I did not know that they were severely lacking a metro system in, these collection of countries. What are these called again? The Balkans, right? Not to be confused with these countries, which I always get them confused, are the Baltics. The Baltics and the Balkans, they're unified. They say, screw metro systems, we don't need them. Brazilians living in Europe in 2023, so this is just a couple years old. I've heard that Brazilians actually travel quite a bit, and a lot of them actually move around the world. I thought that was very interesting. I don't know even where I've heard that, perhaps on a map a long time ago, but I thought it was pretty fascinating. I think that map proves this, right? We have countries in blue that have over 100,000 Brazilians living there. So countries like, most of the UK, Germany, Italy, España, Portugal, right? These countries have 100,000 plus Brazilians. It's pretty impressive and something I would not have guessed. My favorite part of this, though, is that there's literally data for countries that have 12 Brazilians, 30, right? 84. Like, that's pretty impressive, right? That's what's fascinating about, population counts and census, data is that you could get micro, estimates or actual numbers like this. I don't know. I think maps like this are very interesting. And again, at least from an American perspective, I would not have guessed that there were so many Brazilians just in Europe alone. This one sucks, honestly, but that's show it. Poverty, right? This seems to be on the rise. I know cost of living, poverty, just squashed opportunities seem to be, well, definitely dominating people's minds and the news cycle here in the U.S. And unfortunately, this is pretty much a worldwide issue to some degree. Obviously, some places worse than others, but you can see the poverty rate across Europe. Again, I mean, shocking to see 21% in Germany, almost the same in France, even 20% in Luxembourg. That's pretty random. Of course, it's slightly less when you go up to Northern Europe, and that seems to be always the case. They always seem to be a little better off in Northern Europe, especially compared to Southern Europe, and that reigns true in this map. Some crazy numbers down south, 25.8% in Spain, 27.9% in Romania, 30% in Bulgaria, 30% in Turkey. Something very important to note, though, it's about how each country measures poverty. Someone gives a great example here. So Germany's official poverty rate would actually be more like 14.3%. The U.S. official poverty rate is 11%. Now, U.S. with Germany's threshold would actually be around 26.9%, and Germany with the U.S.'s threshold would actually be 5.2%. So while it's important to note that this kind of thing has unfortunately gone up over the years, it may not be all as bad as it seems on certain maps or certain data, right? Because there's a lot of variables and a lot of criteria involved that can kind of change these drastically. Oldest national flags in the world that are continuously used. This is pretty crazy to me. Denmark coming in at 1625, y'all. The Danish, y'all haven't updated your flag in 400 years. I mean, literally this year is 2025. 400 years. How would you redo the Denmark flag? I mean, it's due for an update, right? 400 years. Although 400 years is pretty impressive. It's withstood the test of time. Unchanged. Maybe the Danish flag is just perfect and we don't know it. That's both wild to me and a little bit impressive at the same time. Of course, we have the Dutch flag, 1660, not far behind, very old. Nepal, the UK, that's a prime example. That's a very famous flag and has been around for quite a while. Basically, all of these are in South America and Europe. I think that's pretty interesting. France's flag, the blue color on it, was actually changed in 1974 and back again last year. I did not know that. Is this real? Someone please confirm that to me. That is so random. What did they change about the blue? Just like the shade of blue? Why would they do that? For like such a subtle change. Soil quality. Now, I love maps like this. Very detailed. The SQR values, red and orange being more poor quality, while the greener colors are going to be very good quality soil. And it's pretty mixed bag. I mean, look at this, right? Kind of shocked to see very poor quality up here in the Switzerland, Italy, Austria kind of region. I think that's a little bizarre. A lot of green in Eastern Europe. Great soil quality over there. Pretty much a split mixed bag when it comes to, over here in the British Isles, and just kind of average quality, not horrible, but not great in most of Central Europe. Quality for agriculture, by the way, if anyone wasn't aware. Someone mentions they find it a bit odd that most of northern Spain is poor quality, while it is the greenest area of Spain. Greenest area is in when you're there, like it looks green. And people grow most things there easily. So, I guess we should maybe take this map with a grain of salt, but it's pretty cool nonetheless. And finally, we're going to end it with this one. How addicted to your phone are you? This is mobile screen time. Hours per day last year in 2024. And this is for all of Europe. Now, of course, Many countries didn't submit data here, but this is a little shocking. Maybe not shocking. It's just I wouldn't have really known what to expect. But Eastern Europe and then, Southern Europe as well, right? Look at way down here. Look at Russia, right? 4 hours a day on average. That means that's pretty common to just be on your phone a lot, a good fraction of the day. But honestly, not far behind in Northern Europe as well. The least time, as in people that are just living life not on their phone, actually places like Germany, Belgium, Italy, France, right? Like these places, I guess they're not addicted to their phone too bad. So I don't know if I would have really expected that, right? I guess I think of more like social media presence and famous people more from this region, but apparently the screen time isn't that bad compared to other places. Again, with Portugal being kind of an odd man out, right? Look at them compared to pretty much everywhere else, at least in their vicinity. Portuguese, I guess, love being on their phones, while all their neighbors, not as much. Be honest, what is your screen time? I don't know. Some phones will tell you. My phone tells you, like every week, it'll tell you on like Sunday, like how much hours per day you averaged. It just like randomly will tell you that. And I believe mine fluctuates. I think I average usually 3 hours a day. Sometimes, this is not all the time, but some weeks it says like I've averaged 4 hours and 20 minutes, 4 hours and 30 minutes a day. So that's rare, but it gets up that high sometimes. Never higher than that, though. I would say on average, I would say 3 for me. That's going to do it for this one. There's so many maps we could look at, so perhaps we will do this again very soon. I hope you enjoyed. I thought these were pretty interesting, a lot different than some maps we've seen before. I really appreciate you watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. Until next time, I'll catch you later.